Republican, Democrat, Independent. People are afraid, and we just can't have that in this country. And the Secret Service is ultimately responsible. Here's the last thing I'll say about this. There was a lot of finger-pointing yesterday at local law enforcement. And the Secret Service director started it. He put up that poster, and he said if local law enforcement had just looked to their left, they would have seen the shooter. That may be true, but who was in charge of local law enforcement? They were.
You think he was passing the buck?
Yes. And I know I know he was, and that's how local law enforcement feel. They told me that repeatedly. Listen, I'm not for trying to stop blame for where it needs to go. If it's true that local law enforcement should have been there and should have been on the roof, hey, we should know that. But ultimately, it was Secret Service's decision to deploy local law enforcement partners in the way they did. And if the Secret Service didn't have enough confidence in them to man that building, they shouldn't have put them there. They should have put their own agents there. So ultimately, it's Secret Service decision, and they need to take responsibility. I didn't hear a lot of that yesterday.
It was reported that JD Vance for a second.
Okay, yes.
Are you worried that his comments, like childless cat lady, could alienate the women voters that you need?
Listen, I just say this. As Republicans, we started by talking about the child tax credit. As Republicans, we should be in favor of helping people who want to have families have families. One of the reasons it's hard to have a family in America today is it's really expensive. I mean, parents have to work 2 jobs to have the kind of purchasing power that 50 years ago you could get on one income. That is not a positive thing. That is not a recommendation of our economy. So that's what we ought to be talking about. And I think our message ought to be for folks who want to have families. A lot of Americans do. A lot of Americans have 1 kid. They want to have 2, but it's like, well, we don't know how to do it. We can't afford it. I think we as a party need to offer solutions. That's why I'm going to vote yes on this tax bill.
I mean, some people don't want to have kids.
Yeah,
and I
fair
guess
enough.
should Republicans be talking about women who don't want children in the way that JD Vance did?
No.
Are you concerned that JD Vance is too similar to President Trump? For instance, it was reported that Senator Graham tried to encourage the president to pick Marco Rubio for that exact reason, that he could bring in some more diversity in swing states.
Oh, I don't know. Too similar in views? I mean, or just...
Yeah, exactly. Similar in views.
Oh, I don't know. Guys, the vice presidential pick is, I think a big part of that is how does the top of it, how does the principal, how's the presidential candidate feel? They got to be able to work with this person. So I defer to President Trump on that. He's the best judge of if the pick is good or not, and I like JD. I thought he's a good senator. He's still in the Senate.
Some of your colleagues, though, who are more hawkish on foreign policy are uncomfortable with the fact that he has the views he does on Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, is that problematic?
Oh, no, those I really like. Those are good.
Is
no,
the
I
party
don't
just
think so.
changing on this issue, and he represents that change in your view?
Yeah, the party. I mean, well, changing. I mean, I think voters have probably always been nationalists in the sense that if we have to get involved in something overseas, Republican voters, I think like most voters, they're willing to do that, but it better be in defense of American jobs, American lives, American security. And I think they look at our foreign adventures of the last 30, 40 years, whether we're talking about Afghanistan or Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, there weren't any, now Ukraine, Libya, we could go down a list, there's so many. And I think most voters look at that and they're like, wait a minute, we're paying all this money. It's middle-class and working-class voters who are being asked to go physically volunteer and sacrifice their lives, and what are we getting for it? I think that's the attitude, and I think they're not wrong about that, by the way. So
going back to yesterday's hearing with Director Rowe, Acting Director Rowe, the DNC is coming up after yesterday's hearing. What's your confidence going into a major event that's now going to be in a major U.S. city versus a small town in Pennsylvania?
No, I'd be concerned. I mean, listen, this is why I say everybody would have a lot more confidence in the Secret Service leadership if they would come out and say, all right, here's what we did wrong, the following 5 things. Here are the people who made those decisions, and we're going to stand them down and relieve them of duty. We're going to send a message that, listen, I'm not saying these are bad people. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but in this case, this is a no-fail mission, and they failed on that day. And, there's a little bit of, I thought, yesterday was like, well, the president wasn't killed. Well, but somebody was. I mean, that good firefighter from Pennsylvania was killed. Other people were critically injured. But that's not success. That's dramatic failure. And just because he wasn't the president, former president, doesn't mean his life is not just as important. So this is why I say it's not just our presidential and vice presidential candidates who need to be safe. They do need to be. And that's anybody, by the way, whether it's Kamala Harris or Robert Kennedy or Donald Trump. But it's everyday Americans who might want to go to a political event. And now what? They think they're going to get shot? I mean, So there isn't that confidence there, and yeah, I'm concerned. I'm really worried, and I'm going to be worried until they take some decisive action. That's more than just we're reviewing. By the way, the Secret Service has not done a single interview with local law enforcement. I mean, I asked him yesterday, well, why wasn't local law enforcement on the roof then? If this was their responsibility, as you say, why weren't they on the roof? He didn't know. He hasn't asked. I mean, not good.